Welcome, TV historians. You know what? This is the special In Memoriam episode, and we're going to give you 2 episodes this year, looking back at 2023 and the women who, well, they were the accomplished women. And so we're changing it up from In Memoriam to something that differentiates advanced TV history in your eyes and in that of the world, because we dig a little bit deeper to honor and recognize these women and their accomplishments. So we're calling it the Parade of Accomplished Women. And what do you do when you have a parade? Well, you have to have 2 people calling the color, right? So I am pleased to collaborate today with a past collaborator of ours, Ashley Pacini. Welcome, Ashley, to Advanced TV History. And thanks for joining me today to do this very important exercise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me. It's an honor. The last time we saw each other was a few years ago during COVID. We had collaborated together on talking about women in the industry today. In these next 2 episodes, we're going to be talking about women that have passed on. We're going to celebrate their lives. It's so important to remember these women because they're truly the pioneers for the filmmakers today. And so I'm excited to celebrate them at least one last time, hopefully more in the future, because it helps the community that I run.
Absolutely. This is the history that we need to revisit, because if we aren't talking about it and they maybe don't have much of an IMDb profile or a Wikipedia, then all of their work is lost. And that's not right. These were the lives of some very important and accomplished women. So we are going to dig into this. And I'm thrilled that Ashley is here, because when I've done this in the past, it sort of gets a little depressing because it's just me talking to you, listener. So I'm delighted that Ashley is here to bring this perspective. And she's just going to walk through the different categories that we're going to do in this episode.
In this first episode, we're going to be talking about women who portrayed themselves on TV or represented the unseen. We're going to talk about the big names who we all know. And we'll also talk about the journey women. There's a category or phrase that isn't often thought of, but described as prolific or long careers as solid actors, but who might not have a household name. So the day players that we see in frequent episodes who might not have been one of the main characters. So it's important to celebrate these women because they had a substantial career in the industry.
Absolutely. All right, let's dig in.
So Andrea Faye Friedman died at 53 of complications of Alzheimer's. She was best known for being an actor with Down syndrome. She was a recurring character in the 90s Life Goes On, and a huge representative for any actor really with a disability, but specifically with those with Down syndrome. And I remember watching Andrea on television in the early 90s because in 1991, my little sister was born with Down syndrome. And I was very young, and so I didn't understand the nuances of growing up with a disability. And so our parents had us watch Life Goes On to help us understand that somebody that has Down syndrome can go on to have a very healthy and fulfilling life. Andrea ended up in the series marrying Corky, who was one of the main characters. And so she will sorely be missed, but she was such a huge representation for actors with disabilities, specifically with Down syndrome.
And it is she and Corky who make that series so memorable and one that should be regularly streamed. Another person who represented sort of the unseen was Eileen Saki, who passed at the age of 79 of pancreatic cancer. Eileen was a Japanese-American actress who did not have too many roles. She was in the middle of her career when she was cast as the last Rosie on MASH. But think about it, MASH was set in Korea and she's Japanese. This is just one of the ongoing conversations that we have here at Advanced TV History about the miscasting of Asian characters and how it just feels as though I can't believe that the pool is actually that small, that they didn't have a Korean American or a Korean actress available, that instead they had to go for Japanese American. And that just burns me. Let's move on to Inga Swenson, who passed at age 90. Inga Swenson, just the name. Ooh, Inga. Now you can really hear my Minnesotan. Who will you remember her as? She was in Benson and she was in Soap. She played different characters, but they were Northern European. She was supposed to be Swedish or German, depending upon the role. And in fact, this clip, which we're going to play, is of her as Ingrid Svensson, who is Corinne Tate's Swedish birth mother in that fabulous series, Soap.
Well, look who's here, the Yale birds. Ha! You have no business to be in my house.
Ma. Yes,
Quiet,
dear.
Corinne. You kept my child away from me for 23 years. For 23 years I couldn't be with my baby. And I want you never to set foot near her again. I want you to go now.
23 years? Well, you think about that. Because all I know is that if anyone had taken my baby away from me, I would have moved heaven and earth to find her. And it wouldn't have taken 23 years. Ha!
Yeah, I'm such a huge fan of both TV and Broadway. And Inga had such a prolific career on Broadway as well. So she'll be sorely missed. Sue Johansson is our next woman we're celebrating. She was a Canadian registered nurse and a sex educator. She operated a birth control clinic in Toronto and hosted a series of radio and television programs on birth control, safer sex, and sexual health. She had one of the longest running TV programs, I would say, in television. It spanned decades. And we don't really find that these days, let alone something that's specifically talking about sex education. She had a great career both on television as well as in the sexual health field.
Here's a Canadian theme. The Canadian voice actor Samantha Weinstein passed at the age of 25 after a 2.5-year battle with ovarian cancer. Her voice work can be found in Dino Ranch, Mittens and Pants, and DNAs. Moving on to yet another person who was, in a sense, herself on TV, Carol Duvall, passed at the age of 97. Ashley, go ahead and share what Carol was known for, or what she became to TV.
She was known as the Queen of Craft. She also had a huge long-running program where she would just do crafts on television and had multiple spinoffs. She started on Home and then ended up having a spinoff show of her own called The Carol Duvall Show. She just kind of revolutionized the times, both for television as well as this crafting entertainment that came about in the last several decades.
Which has now become huge business, and as people have more time on their hands. We're going to go on to the next category, which is big names, and we're not going to devote too much attention to them in this episode. However, it is important to identify some of the facets of their lives which made them true feminists, and important to remember in a feminist context in TV history. And the first would be Suzanne Somers, who passed at the age of 76. She was booted from Three's Company when she was at the height of popularity. She was everywhere to be found. She attempted to renegotiate her contract and move herself up from a pittance per episode to $150,000 per episode, which was the same as what John Ritter and other men were getting back in those TV days. She was interviewed in May 2023, and it was kind of asked, what did that feel like? And what she said, ultimately, in the Behind the Velvet Rope podcast, is that it required her to reinvent herself, and that she kind of went outside of what those initial expectations of acting meant for her. And thus she became a health guru and a very prolific author and a cancer survivor right up until she wasn't. God rest your soul, Suzanne Somers. Piper Laurie, go ahead, Ashley.
Piper Laurie passed away at 91. She was born Rosetta Jacobs. She's a Primetime Emmy Award winner and a Golden Globe Award winner. She was nominated for 3 Academy Awards and a BAFTA Award. She has a huge presence from the 60s to the 90s. Most folks will recognize her from something like Twin Peaks. She was also in ER, Will and Grace. I'm just naming some of my favorite shows. So
she was a big name. Similarly, big name. And we're just going to give you a clip because Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall are Laverne and Shirley in heaven. They are in the afterlife, cutting it up with Boo Boo Kitty and doing the brewery thing. Cindy Williams passed at the age of 79 with a short illness. And I will say, I was getting ready to hunt her down and see if she would agree to be interviewed, because she had written a memoir, Shirley I Jest. And if you feel like you need a little pick-me-up, go ahead. When you read Cindy Williams's memoir, you'll grow to find that she really had a lot of talent. Her comedic timing was excellent, and she was vastly undervalued by the industry.
At least I learned a lesson from this week. At least I know that I am not at the mercy of that brewery. And I know that I can stand on these 2 feet when the going gets rough, and I can make it. I can make it too. I know that.
Glenda Jackson was 87 when she passed away. She's such a huge talent, both on Broadway as well as the British stage. She had a career that spanned over 60 years, including 2 Oscar wins. On TV, we know her in the 1980s Muppet Show and a host of made-for-TV movies.
She was big in British politics. And without getting too far into British politics, because it's all complicated and nobody understands it, when you go to these big names and it's like, oh, they must have written a memoir. No, none. There are some unauthorized biographies. So my dream is that there's somebody out there right now working on a memoir of Glenda Jackson, because I think that there's an incredible story there and it just hasn't been told. Another really big name, Sinead O'Connor, passed away just this past year at the age of 56. An incredible career. You can read about it anywhere. But we will share with you the Saturday Night Live clip from 1992 that got her banned for life from Saturday Night Live when she ripped up a photo of the Pope on live TV, and in later interviews claimed that while she knew it was controversial, she felt she really had to do it. She needed to use her platform to make a point.
We find it necessary. We know we will win. We have confidence in the victory of good over evil. Fight the real enemy.
How were you treated when you said, fight the real enemy, and you ripped up that picture of the Pope? How were you treated after?
I knew there would be an aftermath. I didn't expect it. I was going to be carried around in a chair and, have champagne poured all over me or anything, But obviously there was mixed feelings. There was some were supportive and some were not supportive. And I understood those that weren't, because we knew in Ireland 10 years before anyone in America or Canada knew. So I understand that at the time I made that gesture, it was an abhorrent idea in America to suggest that a priest could be sexually molesting a child. So I don't have any, bad feelings or anything about it. I completely understand why people found that an abhorrent idea,
Tina Turner, another huge household name, somebody that I grew up listening to. She died at 83. She had her album Private Dancer, 1985, was a time when MTV was fending off criticism for not including artists of color in their video lineup. And so she's huge, not just in music, but also in representation. Next up, we have Raquel Welch, who died at the age of 82 following a very brief illness. She is half Bolivian, yet most of her career was never credited with being Latina. She also disrupted the idea of the traditional sex symbol, which is considered, at the time, the 1960s and 1970s, the blonde bombshell. She came in as an alternate to that with her long dark hair, and she had these very powerful personas on screen, and so was a great impact during those time periods.
She definitely seems to have been known more for having long legs and a great body from her film roles, which then sort of got her onto TV in the talk show circuit, and a little too much emphasis by the men in the industry of her sex symbol status, rather than the acting chops, which she showed playing a Native American woman in a made-for-TV movie called The Legend of Walks Far Woman, which is about domestic violence, and in another made-for-TV movie about someone diagnosed with ALS. Raquel Welch, there was more there. And this is a theme, sadly. We need to say it, because what we can never do as women in any field or industry is misunderstand really what they're capable of based on what we think we know about people. Next, we have the journey women. We will start off with a woman who you've never heard of. You've hardly heard of any of these women, but they are the ones who, as Ashley said earlier, showed up time and time again, went on probably thousands of auditions amongst themselves. And Carol Locatell, age 82, passed after a lengthy battle with cancer. She was a working actress who appeared in a gajillion single episodes of series, starting with The Flying Nun in 1967, and she posted her last. Now, think about a career. This is not working for the phone company. Posted her last appearance in a TV series called Shameless in 2019. All told, 58 different series or made-for-TV movies.
Another woman is Sharon Acker, who died at 87. She's a Canadian beauty who had small roles in big films in the 60s, where she tended to play a wife or girlfriend, the traditional roles that we see a lot of these women playing. But she was in some really big named shows. And so we're talking Star Trek, Mission Impossible, Gunsmoke, Marcus Welby, MD, Barnaby Jones, The Bold Ones, The Senator, and then the new Perry Mason. So again, these women, as we're talking about them, big shows and big names, couldn't have done it without them.
Exactly. But only one episode per season, which meant that they had to do all the work to get the role, whatever size that role was. And then they really didn't get much after that. Sadly, a much younger person, Annie Wershing, passed at the age of 45. She had endured a 2-year battle with cancer. Annie had gotten her start on General Hospital and went on to key roles in the series 24, Bosch, Timeless, and Star Trek Picard as the Borg Queen in season 2, and The Rookie. Annie Wershing, 45, never really got past the midpoint of a solid acting career.
Carol Cook died at 98, and anybody that might be a fan of Lucille Ball might know this name. She was a protege of Lucille Ball and appeared in many of Lucy's shows that aired in the 50s, 60s, and 70s.
Lucy definitely understood that it was important to keep women working and probably made sure that her writers were creating good roles, even if they were just one or two that somebody might get to have in a season or even in one of her series. And Lucille Ball had many different series to keep people working in. That leaves us with Hayden Gwynn, who passed at the age of 66. And we might not know her, but because this podcast, Advanced TV History, has an international following, perhaps if you watch British TV, you do. Hayden Gwynn was a big name in East End theater or British theater, but she also appeared in Drop the Dead Donkey, which was back in the early 90s, television roles in Peak Practice, 1999 and 2000, Mercy Beat, and she played Camilla in The Windsors. It was a TV series that stretched from 2016 to 2023. Hayden Gwynn at 66.
Shelley Smith died at 70 of cardiac arrest, and she debuted as an actress in 1979, appearing in the NBC telefilm about cosmetic surgery Mirror Mirror and on The Associates. She would go on to guest star on such shows as Fantasy Island, Hotel, The Love Boat, again, Murder, She Wrote. Again, we're seeing this theme of lots of different shows that they were working on. Hunter, Magnet & PI, and Simon & Simon into the early 1990s. She was a game show regular who became a licensed psychotherapist after she left acting.
And then we have Harsha Parati, who passed of a brain tumor at the age of 78. Again, a name that certainly you might see in the credits, you maybe remember because she was on Mannix or Bearcats or The Waltons. She was a strong contender to be Caroline Ingalls in Little House on the Prairie, but that went to another actress. But she did then get a shot to be Eliza Ann Ingalls, who was Charles's sister-in-law in 1977. And then, because it's TV and they can do stuff like this, 3 years later, she's cast as Alice Garvey in Little House on the Prairie. And amazingly, she just did not love acting maybe in that series or maybe acting in general, or maybe had a really bad experience with handsers. And so she wanted to leave. And Michael Landon was really mad because he really ran that show. And so he killed her character off in a fire. So Harsha Parati stood her ground, left the business, but left as a winner. Ashley, we have ripped through a whole bunch of names and their backgrounds and their contributions. And I, was a little remiss in the introduction of who you are and how people are going to be able to learn more about you and get a hold of you in the future. So remind listeners how to follow you and your work.
We're just at The Real Women on the different social media sites on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, wherever you go to check your social media. And we're here just celebrating and profiling current women in the industry. So would appreciate the support. Come follow and hear the current stories of women making impact on this industry.
Excellent. I'm so grateful that you've been with us today. Listeners, sources for our Parade of Accomplished Women were found at Wikipedia, IMDb, Deadline.com, and Entertainment Weekly. Music, as always, for Advanced TV History is Jazzer's Take Me Higher, which is found at freemusicarchive.org. And yes, we paid for it because it's somebody's talent. Jazzers. Lastly, I'd like to thank Mary Lou Morose, as always, our audio editor, for helping me develop these episodes this year, all year long, because these things happen all year long. We've exchanged more than a few texts where it was like, oh no, and somebody died, and thus the script gets born. But all three of us, Mary Lou, Ashley, and I, stand in awe of all of these women and all of their accomplishments. We mentioned them today. May their work and spirits remain with us all. and the many viewers in the generations to come. And that is why I podcast. I'm your host, Cynthia Bemis Abrams.